first of all, thank you for taking the time to come and listen to me talk. And at the end of the session, you will have the opportunity to also share your own personal reasons why you would want to learn Python. So let's just jump right into the show. Can everyone see my screen?
Yep.
Perfect. So this session is being recorded. About myself, we already introduced me, but my passion is really to share my passion of programming with the public at large, because it's had a transformative effect on my life, being that it's not only my job, but also my hobby. It's something that I enjoy doing and that I've seen other people learn to do and also enjoy doing. And that's what I'm dedicating my life to right now, both bringing people into our community and also educating them so that they have the skills required to have fulfilling careers and pursue their side projects. So ask questions as we go along. Ria, can you tell me when there's a question?
Yes, no problem.
Okay. Try to keep the questions related to the topic at hand, and we will have a Q&A session at the end. I just realized that I'm wondering if there's a way for me to, So what I will do, little interruption, I apologize. 1 second. This is going to be part of the recording, unfortunately. But I just realized that I don't have my notes showing on the screen because I haven't configured it properly. So I'm just going to do that right now. I apologize for the inconvenience. Perfect. Okay. So let me just go back into presenter mode. So in this presentation, we're going to talk about what is Python, what it's used for, career opportunities, because, well, people need to earn a living. And right now, programming is a really huge part of our lives. Well, not necessarily writing computer programs, but at least using computer programs. And finally, we'll be talking about the upcoming Python workshop, and I'll be asking the audience to share their own reasons why they're learning Python. So Python is a programming language, and a programming language is a mode of communication between a human being and a machine. So it's in the same way that, for example, the Japanese language is a mode of communication between a Japanese person, or at least someone who speaks Japanese, and another person who speaks Japanese. And that's really all a programming language is. To put simply, computers have their own way of doing things and their own logic, and humans, we have our own way of thinking and our own logic, and we need some kind of medium to communicate between these two stakeholders in our society, and programming languages plays that role. So Python is one of many, many, many programming languages. When I say many programming languages, I mean literally in the thousands. So we're going to start with a broader question. Before we answer the question of why learn Python, we're going to ask the question, we're going to try and answer the question, why learn a programming language in general? So computer languages are used by programmers to make a variety of different computer applications. Anything from video games to interactive websites to software applications that analyze and visualize data to help us make sense of the world. So there's a very broad range of use cases for someone who wants to learn programming. And all these applications play a huge role in our lives. We rely on them for our communication and for our leisure, even for our relationships. And being able to use a programming language gives you the ability to create these experiences and or collect data to get some kind of insights or build applications to connect people. There's really no end. Anything you can automate, anything that can be done in a repeated and mechanical fashion uh, can be written up by a programming language.
Quick question.
Yeah.
Oh, well, is there a course that can teach Python in the School of Continuing Studies?
We're going to get to that at the end of the presentation, but the quick answer is we are going to hold a workshop, an upcoming workshop, which you can sign up. I think signups are available, so you can actually sign up right now, but we will be sending you an email with more information. So, Michael, can I ask you to mute your mic for the moment? You can unmute it whenever you have a question.
No problem.
Thank you. So as some of you might have noticed, but computers are replacing human beings, and this replacement is accelerating. So the need for programmers can only increase, and the job of a programmer will never ever go away. Because fundamentally, a programmer is there to communicate human intent to a machine. And the more computer systems we need, the more programmers we need to create these software systems and maintain them. And programming jobs have not fundamentally changed since programming was a thing. We're talking back in the 50s or even before. We basically do fundamentally the same thing. And although parts of our jobs might get automated in the future, it's very possible. As long as we have a need to tell machines what to do, there will always be a need for programmers to communicate with computers. So you might be wondering how different a programming language is from another. This is an important question to decide which programming language to start with. Are they as different as Chinese and French? If they are, that first choice is going to make a big impact on your programming career. Or maybe they aren't very different. For example, maybe they're as similar as Quebec French and French French. And if you know one, it's very easy to learn the other. In which case, it doesn't make a huge difference which programming language you start with. So my answer for this question is they are actually more like regional dialects than different languages, kind of like Quebec French and French French. And if you pick any two programming languages, let's say Python and JavaScript, even though they're called different programming languages, they're actually really, really similar. So if you know one dialect, it's very easy to learn another dialect of the same language. And in that same manner, if you start with any programming language, whatever programming language you start with, and you get comfortable with it, it'll be very easy for you to learn another programming language. However, in the same way that someone from China might have great difficulties learning French, learning your first programming language is going to take a big investment in time. But after you become proficient in it, it'll be easy to learn another. Since in the end, programming languages are slightly different ways of writing the same thing. So let's talk about Python. That's why everyone came here. Um, and it's one of the reasons you might have come here is because Python is really popular right now. According to the TIOBE index, which is a website that tracks programming language popularity, Python right now is number 3 in terms of popularity behind the programming languages C and Java. And in university setting, it is actually the second most popular programming language taught in introductory programming courses behind Java. And it is the most popular introductory programming language in the top US universities, including MIT and Stanford. So Python is pretty popular. And MIT and universities like MIT and Stanford really set the tone for other universities. So I would not be surprised if Python became the most popular introductory programming language in the future. Not to disrespect McGill, we're a fine educational institution.
And two questions.
Yeah.
So, what are the benefits of learning programming on your own versus taking a class?
So let's start with that question. Good question. Very good question. So your decision on how to learn something is a very personal decision, and it depends on how you like to learn and what motivates you and how quickly you want to learn things. Having an expert explain something to you and set a curriculum and give you feedback on your performance can accelerate your learning and give you a clear direction of what to learn. However, some people are very independent, and in fact, in our industry, we have a lot of self taught programmers. So both methods work and they work for different people. Generally speaking, if you want to learn faster, if you don't want to waste your time, taking a course is a good idea. So it's basically an investment towards time saving and also motivation too. So some people start online courses but never finish them. MOOCs have a notoriously high dropout rate. So a MOOC is an online course, massively online. I forget what the other two letters stand for. People just drop out. And the fact that you commit and you pay, and there's an expectation that from the teacher that you'll show up, and there are consequences for not showing up, is a very strong motivator for people. So, from a motivational perspective, it's also could be a good idea to take a course. Was there another question, Ria?
Yes, the second question is, do I need an English degree to enter this course? How can I get complete information about the cost of this course? I'm assuming it's about the Python workshop.
The information about the Python workshop will be sent to your email, but you could also email me and I'll send you information about it. We will, Ria, could you put my email in the chat? Do you
Yeah,
happen to
no
have it?
problem. And just to mention, you do not need an English degree to attend any workshop at McGill.
That's correct. Well, any workshop offered by the School of Continuing Studies. I don't know about the English faculty. They might have their own thing going on.
Yeah. Um,
Oh, I forgot to actually talk about the slide. So, because Python is so popular, It's very easy to find learning resources. In fact, it is the most popular programming language to learn on platforms such as Udacity and Coursera. Coursera has a Python course with 2 million people who have enrolled in this course, which is crazy. The Java course, Java is another programming language, and the Java course is 300,000. So we can see how much people want to learn Python, and as a consequence, there are many resources being offered by educators to learn Python.
There's a question from Maxime. He's asking, as a self-taught programmer, how do you convince employer that you are qualified for the job?
That is a really good question. Excellent question. I actually spoke to an employer last week, and I had a similar kind of inquiry. The basic fundamental question is, how do you get to the second stage of the interview? How do you get the employer to take notice of you enough to actually give you a chance to prove your skills and to assess you? Because at that point, you can prove yourself by simply showing the employer that you code. So how do you stop the employer from filtering out your CV? You can do things like mention in your CV that you have a GitHub. You can put your GitHub, you can put projects in your GitHub. Um, and basically, you want to communicate that you have done things that you've programmed and that you can learn. You can also put in your cover letter some of the projects you've done and how much you enjoy learning and how fast you learn. So these are things that are important for employers. But yeah, it is a challenge, absolutely. So that's what university credentials really give you, a foot in the door. So programming languages are very similar. I cannot stress how similar a programming language is to another programming language. However, even though they're very similar, they're used for different purposes. In the same way that business English and um, the English that you use with your family are a little different in that the words are a little different. But what is most different about business English is that it's used for a different purpose. And if you started using business English at home, people would think you're weird. And if you started using the same kind of English that you use with your friends and family in a business setting, people would also think you're weird. So for programming languages, it's the same kind of situation. Even though they're very similar, they're used in different situations. And Python specifically is the programming language that is used for data analysis and to visualize data. And you might be wondering why. And the reason for its strength in data processing is that many programmers have written computer applications to analyze data in Python. And programmers share what they've done with other programmers so that you don't have to reinvent the wheel. And you can easily create applications by using other people's work. So to use a metaphor, building a computer application is like building a pyramid. And in the case of Python, people have already built the base for you. So all you need to do is build the top levels.
So just one question and one comment. Rad says that MOOC stands for Massive Open Online Courses.
Yes.
And
Thank
then
you.
a question from Eric. He's, with respects to data science, would you say that Python is a good choice to build data analytic tools?
Absolutely. Data science has become synonymous with Python. Yes, you can use other programming languages like R. Some people use R, but Python is an excellent choice. R is a little more academic. So researchers at universities use R, etc. In industry, Python is definitely has an edge in data science. By the way, R is another programming language used for data analysis. It's a one-letter programming language, which is kind of weird.
So another question, it's from Michael Moore. He said, I signed up for the 2021 Premium Python Certification Bootcamp bundle. Do you have an opinion about an online course like this? Provided via Mashable.com, 13 courses, 538 lessons.
I have no, I've never heard of this particular lesson. Online lessons are tricky because the audience of the audience varies a lot, and the goal of the audience also vary. An audience member varies a lot. A student. Uh, so typically, these courses want to have as broad a reach as possible, so they can sell as many courses. And what they end up doing is doing a lot of project-based demonstrations. From my experience, I don't know if this is the case for that particular course, Michael. I wish I knew so I could give you specifics. But from what I've seen generally, that's their instructional method. And one of the pitfalls is that the students don't have the theory to necessarily understand what's going on. So what ends up happening is that the student often has misconceptions, and these misconceptions can severely limit what the student is able to learn and how fast the student is able to learn. So these kinds of courses, I think, are really well adapted to people who already have a good theory of programming languages. Doesn't matter what programming language you use because they're all the same in the end. And then if you do have that kind of background, then these kinds of courses can build on your theoretical knowledge and can show you the specifics of how to apply a programming language to specific tasks.
A question from Yao. She or he said, I noticed a lot of job descriptions required Python and SQL. Which one do you recommend to learn first?
I recommend learning SQL. SQL is an easier language. It isn't a programming language, it's a computer language, but it's not a programming language. And you can get into it very easily, and it'll give you a taste whether or not you actually enjoy programming, which is kind of important. And there's not much theory to understand with SQL. So I would suggest getting your toes wet with SQL. And once you're comfortable with SQL and you're able to do certain things, then you can learn Python, and then you can learn how to combine the two, because that's really where the power comes in. Any other questions?
Not at the moment.
Perfect. So what is special about Python and what differentiates it from other programming languages isn't the language itself. It's that Python programmers, which by the way are known as Pythonistas, have generously donated what they've done to the community. And it just so happens that Python programmers were interested in data processing. And that's what made Python one of the top, or arguably the top language for data processing and visualization. So even though data processing and visualization is Python's main strength, it is not the only thing that Python can do. For example, you can do game development in Python. I was discussing with Michael before that you can do 3D modeling with Python using a grinder. Um, Many system administrators use Python to automate their tasks. And you can use it in web development. However, when I say web development in the context of Python, what I mean is storing and processing user data. You cannot build websites using Python. However, you can store users' data using Python. So generally speaking, Python is a very versatile programming language with a lot of use cases. And since it's already very popular, people will find new ways to use it. Maybe in the future, we'll be able to build websites in Python. Who knows? And so let's talk about the job market. And one of the biggest needs on the job market is programmers who can process and make sense of data. And Python, as I've mentioned 8 times during this presentation, is really geared or is really well suited for that particular task.
A question from Eric. Will there be any workshops around Python to build out data integration scripts, automation jobs?
Specifically for that, right now there's nothing planned. However, we do have a data science program for people who want to use Python generally to make sense of data, which touches that topic in some way. So as one of the audience members pointed out about 5 minutes ago, there are many job opportunities for Python programmers. You just need to go on a website like Indeed.com, and Indeed is a website that simply aggregates different job postings, and you can search for Python in Montreal, and you'll get 1,933 job postings. That is a lot of jobs. So demand right now is very high. Um, so it's easy to find a job if you're proficient and you can communicate your skill to employers. So there are many jobs, but you might be saying, well, Jack, there are many service sector jobs. How much do Python jobs pay? So different sources will give different estimates, but Python programmers generally are paid quite well. Around the average salary is around $90,000. So I got these two numbers from two websites, Indeed.com and Talent.com, to give you some kind of idea. Of course, these are not academic sources, and this is survey-based data. But it makes sense from what I've seen in the industry. These are in Canadian dollars, by the way. So these are jobs in Canada. In the States, the salary in the United States of America, the average salary is even higher. And just knowing Python is a marketable skill, even if you don't want to become a Python developer, especially in data-driven sectors of the economy, such as banking and finance. And being a programmer has other perks. Software developers are very much in demand. And apart from the high salaries that they can ask for as a result, many employers allow them to work from home. And even before the pandemic, about 12% of software developers worked from home, it's a pretty high number compared to other occupations.
A question from Valentine.
Go ahead.
Yeah, concerning jobs, do we all need a university diploma or are skills and hard work fine?
Yeah, so skills and hard work are fine. What a university diploma helps you with is your first job. It helps you get your foot in the door. However, I've seen many people without university degrees who were able to get employed as long as they're able to communicate that they have the skills, maybe in their CV or in their cover letter. A university degree is not a necessity. And in fact, a university degree from a traditional computer science or software engineering program arguably has a limited effect on your abilities. It proves that you're good at mathematics, and it proves that you have a minimum ability in computer programming. However, generally employers are looking for more than just the minimum level of programming ability that a computer science degree communicates. So we have a lot of self-taught practitioners in our field who have no university credentials. I know a senior software engineer who does not even have a CJEP degree. He just went from high school to software development.
Okay, and another question. If Python itself cannot be used to build a website, what are the minimum applications needed?
I don't quite understand that question. If you could rephrase it and ask it again, um, I will try and address it. So, getting back to remote work, we have a lot of remote work, which is not surprising given the fact that we do not interact with people very much. And if you are a person who does not like to interact with people when they work, programming might be very attractive to you. In fact, quite an interesting statistic, 52% of software developers are happier during the pandemic. And part of the reason is the flexibility that they can work from home. So that's just to tell you that programmers prefer to work from home. It's definitely a field where working from home is very well suited to the occupation.
So Norman just clarified his question a little bit. He asked
Okay.
if Python itself cannot be used to build a website,
Mhm.
what else is needed?
Oh, right. So to build a website, to build the visuals of a website, you need to learn HTML and CSS. And if you want the website to be interactive, you need to learn JavaScript. And there are no alternatives to these languages. Okay, there are some alternatives, but no one uses them. Everyone uses HTML, CSS, and JavaScript.
And a question from Murad, he asks, what is the hourly rate to hire an analyst with Python skills? And where do you find them if I have a 3-hour short program to execute a small job?
Good question. Uh, so I don't actually know, but you might want to try a job board like monster.ca or indeed.com. But I don't know how much it costs. You might want to look at different job postings to see what other people are offering for those kinds of positions. Also, you might try Upwork. Upwork is another website for short-term work. Upwork. So, one thing that is very unique about the field of software development is that many people, and in some surveys, actually most people in the industry, are actually self-taught. So, according to a survey of thousands of developers that was undertaken by the website stackoverflow.com, a majority of the respondents had no formal training. So, even if you don't have a university degree, you can still succeed as a developer. And I've seen it countless times. People without university degrees succeed and have very well paying jobs. So you might be wondering, hey, is software development for me? Should I become a Python developer? So I've um, created these 4 questions, and I want the audience members who happen to have pens or maybe notepad to answer each of these questions on a scale of 1 to 5. 1 meaning strongly disagree, and 5 meaning strongly agree. After you've answered all 4 questions, You can add up the score for each question, which will give you a number that will indicate how suitable you are to software development. Of course, this is not scientific. It's just something to explore and give you something to think about. So I'm going to give the audience 3 minutes to go through this exercise. And after the 3 minutes, we will talk about a little bit about the upcoming Python workshop. I'll just mention it. And then we'll have our Q&A session. So you have until 6:43 to answer the questions listed here. And then at that point, we will continue with our Q&A session. And you can ask questions now if you would like. Let's do that.
Okay, there's a question from Michael.
Mm-hmm.
Does one have to purchase the base programming module or kernels in order to write create in Python? If so, what might be the range of cost investment be?
There is no cost. Everything is free. I've never ever paid for any Python modules in my life or any modules from any programming language. How many people don't give up easily on a problem in the audience? Raise up your hand. Oh, Michael doesn't give up easily. Does anyone know how to raise their hand in the, there's a button you can press. Oh, wow, a lot of people. You got some uh, non-giver uppers. Wow. Okay, let's everyone put down your hands. I don't even know how to put down hands. How many people get excited if they find a new way to do something? I get super excited. Oh my God. A lot of programming is just about finding new ways to do the same thing. In the end, really in programming, we just do this, the same basic kind of things. We just do it in slightly different ways. And when we find a new way to do something, we're pretty excited. I mean, of course, each computer application is different, but the reason it's different is because we combine small things into bigger things in unique ways. Everyone put down your hands. How do I put down people's hands? Who scored above 15? Raise your hand. Everyone who scored above 15. Oh, wow, a lot of people. Hey, programming might just be for you. All right. One thing that's interesting about programming is that it's all about problem solving. And if you enjoy solving problems and right now you feel understimulated at your work, and you're looking for an occupation where there's more stimulation and harder problems to solve, programming is definitely a good occupation for that. You're never bored. There's always something to do. There's always something to learn. There's always a problem to fix.
Some questions. So Julian asks, can you comment on the advantages of Python over R for data analysis?
Right. Good question. It really depends on the context that you're working in. If you're going to work for a university, then many of the work that's been done by other people will be done in R. And when you conduct your research, you can then just use what other people have already done. However, if you work in industry, a lot of the work has already been done in Python. So it's not that one language is better than another. Is that different? Each language has its own community and uh, packages have already been created for you. And it's up to you to figure out for your particular project which community it applies to more. If you're a marine biologist, it's probably R. If you're in finance, it's probably Python. But without knowing those specifics, it's hard for me to answer that question.
This might be a similar question. Elliston asks, why are there different programming languages? Why cannot just one programming language do it all?
That is a very good question. Who asked that question?
Elliston.
Right. So, in theory, we don't need all these programming languages because basically, is you're just writing the same thing in slightly different ways. So, why have so many of them? Programming is a young field, and maybe in the future, people will agree on one programming language. That being said, some programming languages are way faster to run, but they're harder to use. They're more restrictive and they stop you from doing certain things. So there's a trade-off between speed and flexibility. But for example, Python, R, JavaScript, why do all three exist? Couldn't we just have one? In theory, yes, we could have just one, but in practice, these programming languages were created to serve a certain purpose, and communities have formed around these programming languages. And each community has its own set of libraries and tools to help people build certain applications. So each programming language has found its niche, its community. It's not about the language itself, but it's about the community around the language.
Okay, and question from Normand. What would be a good backend language to build an EMR, electronic medical record? Could Python be used?
Yeah, as a backend language, Python is a fine choice. You want to, I mean, Python, even JavaScript with Node.js is also a good choice. Even PHP. Your decision would be less about what programming language would be better in theory and more about what can I learn or who can I work with. So basically, you have to ask yourself, what resources do I have? So if you know a really good PHP programmer or backend JavaScript programmer, you go with that. In the end,
Uh,
it's really the same thing.
okay. Valentine asks, if we like to create or refine a system instead of constantly fixing problems, does programming suit us?
Ask that I didn't catch that first part.
If we like to create or refine a system instead of constantly fixing problems, does programming suit us?
No. So programming is all about fixing problems. When you're creating something, you're going to have to fix problems because there's going to be bugs in your code. And fixing bugs is just a huge part of programming. And some people find it frustrating and some people don't like it. And some people get stressed out. And if you're one of those people, programming is not for you.
Michael asks, is Unix a programming language, or is it a pure machine language?
Unix is an operating system. In the same way that Windows is an operating system, in the same way that Mac OS is a operating system. Well, okay, so let me be a little more precise in my answer. Unix is a family of programming languages that all share certain characteristics. Mac OS X is actually Unix based. So is Ubuntu. Windows is not Unix based, and Windows is its own thing. So I hope that answers your question.
So Valentine asks, could Python replace C and C++? I don't know if that's what it's called in the airplane industry.
That's a good question. So during this presentation, I kept repeating that there's not much difference between programming languages. In the end, it's the same thing, slightly different ways of writing things. C and C++, there is one differentiating factor, is that uh, they are super efficient, like super duper efficient compared to Python. We're talking like 5 times more efficient. And in the airplane industry, and it depends on your application and what you're trying to do, but generally, how efficient and how fast a programming language is important. So in certain sectors, C and C++ will never get replaced by Python. And the airplane industry might be one of them.
Eric asks, how does Python stack up against old school languages like C, hashtag, ASP.NET, MVC frameworks with regards to data science analysis?
Oh, Python. So C# is not a data science language. I don't know anyone who does data science in C#. Maybe some people do. If you do, please message me. So in terms of data science, Python is the way to go. And if you want to do data science in C#, you can, but you'll have to do a lot of things from scratch. Whereas with Python, you can use some already existing packages. And for the other, so ASP.NET is not a programming language, it's a framework. And it's a framework that's not really related to data science. And the third thing that was mentioned, Ria, could you repeat it?
It's an ASP.NET and MVC frameworks.
Right, MVC is not really related to data science. MVC is a way to structure computer programs that deal with user interfaces.
This is just a comment by Elliston. Python is starting to replace R in biology fields, if there are any biologists here. And then Majid asks, which level in Python/R do we need for analytics?
By analytics, I'm going to assume you mean data science. So there are two components. One is you actually have to have a good understanding of the language itself, regardless of the application. No matter how you use a language, in the end, you're basically using the same techniques, and computer languages are structured a certain way. So you need to really know the grammar of a programming language and the semantics of what a programming language, the meaning behind what you're writing. So you need to have a good grasp of that, and then you need to have a good grasp of how to apply Python to the data science um, problems, and then you need a good understanding of the packages involved, the libraries, and how people use these libraries. So that's another skill set that you have to master. Once you've mastered uh, those two skill sets, then you're basically able to solve problems related to data science.
Okay, and Michael asks, is there a range of Python plugins or modules that you can bring in as a programmer?
Absolutely. So uh, so there's the Python package index. with like, I don't know how many thousands of packages. These are all free, by the way. Not only are they free, but they're very easy to install. If you search for game development, you can search for anything really. And there's a whole bunch of stuff related to game development, including someone who created the Snake game in Python, and Hacksaw, which is another game. And let's say you wanted something related to biology. Apparently, there's biologists in the audience. There is stuff related to biology. Valid clone rates in Golden Gate DNA assemblies. I don't know what this means. I'm not a biologist. So I hope that answers your question, Michael.
He said yes.
Okay, good. Any other questions?
Yeah, Annie asks, is there a version of Python that is good to start learning? I have started learning Python using version 2.5, but there are new versions since.
Yeah, so Python 3 is right now much more popular than Python 2. So if possible, I would suggest that you switch to learning Python 3. I mean, they're very, 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 very similar. So if it's inconvenient for you to switch, maybe you shouldn't. But if it's not a huge problem to switch, I would recommend you switch.
Okay, and then Norman asks, is JavaScript faster than Python?
They're approximately the same speed. Uh, and yeah, they're approximately the same speed. I would argue that JavaScript is slightly faster than Python.
Another question regarding the versions of Python from Elliston. He asks, what are the differences between Python 2.0 and 3.0?
Right. So Python 3 point, they're very, very, very similar, but there are certain small differences. And these small differences make them incompatible. So you can't just take code written in Python 3 and then run it in a Python 2 interpreter, because the Python 2 interpreter will not understand some of the structures you're using, and vice versa. So, uh, I mean, I'm not going to mention the differences explicitly because it gets very, very technical, but they're 99.9% similar. Oh, and Python 3 has some new cool features that Python 2 doesn't. So, related to adding metadata to your code. I believe type annotations is now a thing. But I mean, this is such a technical, yeah, type hints. This is such a technical topic that it's really hard for me to explain it in this kind of very general webinar, because I will lose 99% of my audience if I do.
Okay. Eric asks, which editor would you recommend to code Python in?
Right. So I think the most popular one is IntelliJ. It's also free. What is it called? Yeah, so the JetBrains IntelliJ editor is probably the most popular one. You can also use another one called VS Code. If you're just starting out, though, it doesn't make a huge difference. I would, as a beginner, I would start with this one, IntelliJ IDEA from JetBrains.com.
Okay, and Norman asks, is a database stored on a server?
Databases generally are hosted on servers if they need to be accessed by people on the internet. So the answer is yes.
And Michael asks, is JavaScript the same as Java, or was it a derivative of Java?
JavaScript. So in the world of programming languages, There are some minor differences between the different programming languages, and Java and JavaScript are actually not related. Even though they share the first four same letters, JavaScript is closer to Python than it is to Java, which is pretty mind-blowing. And the reason that Java and JavaScript share very similar names is purely historical. It was basically the people who created JavaScript wanted to give it a name that would make it easier to make it more appealing. And the name they came out with was JavaScript, even though they're not related.
Okay, and then Don asks, Don asks, where can you download Python 3?
Oh, we can just a quick Google search would give you the answer.
Okay, and then Pat asks, how does Spider with the Y compare to other IDEs?
Spider. I've never heard of this IDE. I'm interested to know also, but it seems that they have some data science. Oh, this is what scientists use. Okay. Yeah, so scientists like this kind of stuff because they can visualize their data right in the IDE. And if you use something like IntelliJ, the visualization will not be in real time. So this is actually super convenient. Any other questions?
No other questions.
Perfect. Well, I would like to end the workshop by mentioning that McGill will be offering an introduction to Python workshop, which I will probably be the instructor. And this workshop is really just to give you a good theoretical understanding of the Python language, something that most online resources do not teach. And once you have that good theoretical foundation, you can go off and create wonderful projects and actually understand what you're doing. You will get information about this workshop in your email in the coming weeks. And on that note, I'd like to thank everyone for participating, and I hope to see one of you in my classes sometime in the future. Goodbye.